Good morning all. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Amy Rudman. I'm the Democratic and Scrutiny Services Officer supporting the hearing this morning. I would just like to take you through some housekeeping first, if I may. So may I remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording will be archived for future viewing. Please could all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. If a participant wishes to speak, they may use the hand raise function, which is at the top of your Teams screen. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or to grab the attention of myself or the chair for the hearing, who will shortly be elected. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chair or democratic officer know. And if you have a webcam, you can try turning this off in the first instance, just to help with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so at least you can be heard by all participants. On screen this morning are the three members of the licensing subcommittee: Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Drake and Councillor Norman. I'd like to start proceedings, please, by asking for a nomination of chair for the hearing today. Yes, Councillor Wilkinson.
I nominate Councillor Pamela Drake.
Thank you.
And I second that nomination.
Thank you for that second. Thank you, Councillor Norman. Therefore, Councillor Drake, you are duly elected as the chairman for this licensing hearing. Could you please start proceedings this morning by checking for any declarations of interest and then doing introductions for all parties on the hearing this morning? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Welcome, everybody. I would like to introduce ourselves. I know Amy's just told us. I'm Councillor Pamela Drake. I also have my fellow members of Councillor Jane Norman and Councillor Margaret Wilkinson. The item today we're looking at is the grant of a premises licence, Wilmore's 1935, premises situated at the former golf kiosk, Cliff Parade, Penarth. And I would request that those taking part introduce themselves and whether they have made representations to the authority and whether anybody has any declarations of interest. No? Can't see
believe that that's no declarations from yourself, councillors, is it?
No.
No. Lovely. Would you like to start then with, we'll go legal officer for introductions, then licensing officer, then applicant, then other persons, please, Chair, if that's okay?
Yes, and I would also like to say that any questions are made through myself and not directly to the applicant and the responsible authorities. So I'll hand it over to our legal officer to outline procedures.
Good morning, subcommittee. My name's Richard Price and I'll be the legal advisor to the subcommittee this morning. Sorry, did you want me to also outline the procedure at this point?
Please, if you could.
Yeah, of course. The procedure has been sent out. It's quite a long procedure, and that takes account of the various parties that can be involved in a subcommittee. Today we have only representations from other persons. So what will happen is the licensing officer will outline the application that's been applied for. If there are any questions at that point in relation to the licensing officer, those questions can be put. Thereafter, we will hear from the applicant themselves. Parties can put questions, and I emphasise at this stage it's only questions to the applicant. Thereafter, I can advise that the responsible authorities in terms of South Wales Police, those matters have been agreed. We will then hear from, I understand, Mr. Thomas, who will be advocating on behalf of two other individuals. And again, people will have the opportunity to put questions. Once all the questions have been taken, the parties will have the opportunity to make representations in relation to the application. Once everybody's had their opportunity to say what they want to say, there'll be a further opportunity to sum up. Further, in relation to representations need to be confined to representations that have already been made. They can be expanded upon, but for example, if somebody hasn't raised an issue regarding prevention of crime and disorder as part of their representations, they can't be brought in at this stage. And again, representations must relate to licensing objectives. I hope that assists.
Thank you very much for that. Can I hand over to our licensing officer to outline the application?
If I may, Chair, just before the licensing officers come in, I believe Mrs. Phelps has joined us and is on screen at the moment. I just want to check, Mrs. Phelps, can you hear us okay? Mrs. Phelps, can you hear proceedings at the moment? Sorry to interrupt, Chair. If you wish to continue with introductions, I'll try and reach Mrs. Phelps over the telephone and email, and I'll be back with you shortly.
Right, that's fine. Well, I'm going to hand over now to our licensing officer.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. It's Yvonne Witchell, the team manager for licensing, and I will be presenting the report and a short update on where we are at the moment. Chair, should I just stop for the moment while we make sure that one of the residents is fully connected before I present the report? So I'll just switch my microphone off for a second.
If you wish to take introductions from the applicant and from the other person's, Chair, you may do so at the moment, because we can obviously bring Mr. and Mrs. Phelps up to speed at that point, and I'm just going to try and reach them now.
Do you wish to wait? Would it be better if we actually waited?
We can do, Chair. Yes, that's no problem.
So everybody's on board, so we don't have to repeat ourselves. How are we doing, Amy?
Unfortunately, the telephone number for Mr. and Mrs. Phelps is invalid. So I have managed to reach them via Teams chat. So I've just asked them to disconnect and reconnect. Bear with me one moment, Chair.
Okay.
I have asked Mr. and Mrs. Phelps to disconnect and reconnect, Chair, which I believe they have just done, because it's showing me that they've disconnected. So if you could bear with us one moment. I do apologise for this, Chair. I'm afraid Mr. and Mrs. Phelps haven't reconnected. I am corresponding with them via email and the Teams chat, but they haven't seemed to reconnected at the moment. So it's at your discretion whether you'd like to continue, and if they join, we can re-summarise at that point.
I think it's best that we move on now.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Apologies for that. I will continue to work with Mr. and Mrs. Phelps to get their connection going.
Right, okay. Well, I'll hand over to Yvonne now, our licensing officer.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone again. Richard.
Sorry, Chair. I just think we need to finish off the introductions from the other parties, including the applicant and the other persons who are present online. On the point of connection, if this was an in-person meeting, it is of course the individual's responsibility to ensure that they make their way to the meeting. Of course, we'll provide assistance where we can, but it is made clear that we're not ICT experts providing that level of support.
Right then, who else wants to introduce themselves? I can't see actually who's online at the moment.
I'll kick off if you want, Chair. My name is Will Lane. I'm an operational manager in the shared regulatory services, and the licensing function sits within my teams.
Thank you. Who? Any other person would wish to introduce themselves?
Hello, we are Mr. and Mrs. Holland. We are the applicants of Wilmore's 1938.
Thank you.
I'm Roger Thomas, and appearing for of 3 Cliff Parade, appearing in my own behalf, but also on behalf of Roger Lewis, who regrets he's not able to be with us today. And I have with me on screen Mrs. Donovan Jones of also of Cliff Parade. I hope we'll get it right, because we're both trying to work on one screen with a false background, so that if one of us disappears, we've got ourselves the wrong place on the camera. By the way, I can't find this little hand that's allowed to supposed to allow me to break in. At the top, I've got people, chat, reactors, and a more. But it's the more, is it?
That's the one.
It's under reactions, Mr. Thomas. If you click on that, there is a little yellow hand that will appear, and you press that. But please don't worry too much, because the chair will bring you in at the appropriate point.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to break in. Thank you.
Is there anybody else online that wish to introduce themselves?
Mr. and Mrs. Phelps have indicated they have rejoined, Chair.
Right, that's fine.
Mr. and Mrs. Phelps, would you like to come on screen and address the committee if you can hear us?
Yes, please. I'm not sure how to get onto the screen. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mrs. Phelps, yes, and you've used the raise hand function correctly, and you have now just appeared on screen. So your camera is on.
Yes, I can see now.
Thank you very much for joining us. You haven't missed any of the proceedings. We have introduced the licensing subcommittee members that are on screen for you now, Councillor Norman, Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Drake. And we've also just started our introductions. So you have a legal officer present, Mr. Richard Price, 2 licensing officers for the authority present, which is Yvonne Witchell and William Lane. And then we were just introducing Mr. Roger Thomas, who's on screen at the moment. And then obviously yourself as the final introduction. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for rectifying the technical difficulties. So your chairman today is Councillor Drake, so she will carry on with proceedings now. So if you wouldn't mind just turning off your camera and microphone until we can bring you in at the appropriate point, that would be really appreciated.
Right, I don't believe there's anybody else to give introductions. Is that right, Amy? Because I can't see.
That's correct, Chair. Everybody has introduced.
Right, that's fine. Well, we'll go back to our licensing officer, Yvonne Witchell, now.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I will just run through the report that the councillors have before them, just give you a little update on some supplementary information that has been circulated. So as the Chair says, the purpose of the hearing today is to consider an application under the Licensing Act for a premises licence at Wilmore's 1938, the former golf kiosk, Cliff Parade, Penarth, an application submitted by Will Cater Limited. The report the members have before them sets out the application process. There is a copy of the application form itself, a copy of some proposed conditions submitted by South Wales Police, and a schedule of representations that the council has received in respect of this application. As none of the representations have been withdrawn committee, a full hearing of this application is required. In addition to the report papers, 2 sets of supplementary information have been circulated to the members, and I believe also to all the parties taking part today. And that is a set of photographs of the location, and a set, and that was submitted on behalf of the residents' representatives, and a set of photographs of the building and a link to a press report, and that was submitted by the applicant. So Amy, I think everybody has had a set of the supplementary papers.
That's correct, yes. All parties have received that, and they're also available with the hearing papers on the public website.
Okay, thank you. So the application for the grant of a premises licence has been received. Appendix A of the report sets out the application, and in brief, this seeks authorisation for the licensable activity of the sale by retail of alcohol. The permitted hours applied for are 10:30 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. each day of the week. Alcohol for consumption on and off the premises, and there is no application within. There is no application for non-standard timings outside of the times quoted. Also included in the original application was a request for permission to provide recorded music. However, under the Deregulation Act 2015, the provision of recorded music is no longer a licensable activity. It doesn't require a license, provided that the premises is licensed to sell alcohol, and the activity takes place between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. Each day. And if further information is required on this point, I'd be happy to provide it at the appropriate time. The application includes an operating schedule which sets out the steps the applicant proposes to take to promote the licensing objectives, and this can be found in box M of the application form. The licensing process includes the circulation of an application to a number of the statutory agencies, and that includes the South Wales Police. And discussions took place between the two parties in relation to a number of additional proposed conditions to support the licensing objectives if the application was granted. And at this point, the applicant has agreed to the inclusion of the conditions in the operating schedule, and these are available at Appendix B for your consideration. There was a change of timings during the application process, and the hours, although the police quote the hours, original hours applied for, members are asked to note that the timings for the sale of alcohol were reduced after the application was circulated for consideration. The application was advertised in accordance with the regulations, and 11 representations were received from residents, and the relevant representations from that are included within the summary at Appendix C of your report. When considering representations, the statutory guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003 was considered, and only those relevant representations which relate to the licensing objectives are included within that summary. I'm not aware of any other change of circumstances, Chair, since the application was submitted, and in that case, that's the report and application before you.
Right, thank you for that, Yvonne. Do any other members of our committee wish to seek any clarification of Yvonne?
No.
Chair, can I ask what those now reduced hours are that we're dealing with?
It is 10:30 a.m. to 10:30 p.m.
And that's 7 days a week.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that, Yvonne. No other questions to Yvonne? No? Well, thank you, Yvonne, for that. We'll now invite the applicant or their representatives to present the case and bring forward any witnesses if necessary. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Holland are on their way, Chair.
Oh, right, okay.
Sorry.
Just putting our makeup on, sorry.
Sorry. So everything that has been discussed already is correct to how we've put the application in. I would like to just say on our behalf that the licensing that we've actually applied for within the times, the building will not be open 7 days a week at those times. We actually applied for a later license so that, keeping with our lease, we can go forward in the summertime and hold 6 events which the council have granted us. So instead of going forward and applying for 10's license every time for these events, this was the reason why I put the extra time onto the original license. The building, in fact, will actually only be open till 6 o'clock in the winter and 8 o'clock in the evenings in the summertime.
Nothing further to add?
I don't have anything further to add, no.
Right. Councillor Jane Norman wished to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Holland. What events do you hold, please, and intend holding?
So we are looking to hold a Christmas festival dash in this year up at the cliff tops, which will be a mile dash across the cliff tops and back. That'll be actually in the daytime, family run, family and community based. Then going on to the summer, there will be a classic car and cake coffee event. There will be also a room for a triathlon event, which will be also run in the daytime. Then also we're hopefully looking into going forward with production 68 and 78 and going to do the food festival with them and a picnic festival with them as well.
So these are all community-based events, so they'll be on the grass, on the green area. So obviously we want a sort of level playing field so we can operate like our neighbours operate on the same basis, which is the 1030 licence, and that's the reason for that. We don't envisage going very late. We understand that as we have neighbours. Charlotte was the licensee holder for 5-6 years at our other location with no complaints. We do understand change. When change happens, it can worry people, but we're both family members, family orientated. We're not here to run a bar where people are getting drunk and disorderly. We don't want that sort of trade. We want to have families having a drink, having a pizza. And the idea of the takeaway license is that they can get a platter of cheese and a platter of meat, go home, grab a nice bottle of wine. We're not selling cheap wine, we're selling very high-end sort of wine and ale. So we're looking for that type of clientele. We're not looking to sell alcohol freely to the car park, freely to anyone that walks past. We have a Check 25 policy, which is in place, which is what we've submitted and agreed to with the police. And that is how we're going to move forward with it. We welcome any problems or any complaints from neighbours. We want to get on with our neighbours. We want them to be customers. We want to be able to offer our services to them as well, and that they'll feel comfortable and feel happy with us being there. That's what we're all about, and literally that's all we want to say, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else from our committee wish to ask a question? Councillor Wilkinson, do you need to raise anything?
Yes, please. You've already been granted for these issues that you're going to have in the summertime and all the festivals. You've already got that, haven't you? So we're not going there at all. We're not looking at that. So that's okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. I believe Mr. Roger Thomas has put his hand up. Would you like to ask a question which is relevant to this application?
Yeah, if I can work this out. Thank you. Yes, please. Could I ask the applicants in that case, if what they're proposing, I know that the licensing and planning issues are completely separate and there's nothing personal in this at all, but your planning permission doesn't allow you to do those things. You can't do any off sales. Your planning permission is only for on sales, and your hours under your planning permission are much shorter. I don't understand the connection.
Talking about licensing here, though, aren't we?
Mr. Thomas, perhaps I can intervene at this stage with the chair's permission.
Yes.
As you correctly identified at the outset of your question, they're two completely separate regimes. So, for example, if Tesco were going to build a supermarket, they'd be entitled to apply for their license to be able to retail alcohol, but they'd also have to have planning permission for that supermarket to be built. So if it becomes a planning violation, the local authority would look to enforce under the planning conditions. Similarly, if it was a licensing breach of condition, so they are two completely separate regimes and they operate independently of one another. So we can't not grant a license that we're considering today on the basis, because if they're not compliant with each other, that would be something that would have to be regularised, because in any event, there would be offences being committed that could be enforced. Does that assist at all?
Does that answer your question, Mr. Thomas?
Well, obviously, Richard Price is pointing out that it's a question for another venue, but I'm pointing it out to the applicants that what they're seeking to do and the license they're seeking to get is one which I'll come back to it in my own representations. It doesn't seem to comply with what they're allowed to do, so that quite separately from this, certainly the residents would have no problems, particularly with what is allowed under the under the permission, but they seem to be going much more widely, and I don't understand the idea of events when that doesn't seem to be covered by the planning permission. But anyway, that's perhaps, Richard, for another forum, another day.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Does anybody else wish to raise anything? No, I can't see any other hands up. If Mr. Thomas could put his hand down, please.
Hang on, 2 ticks. I'll try and work out how to do that. Hang on.
Okay.
I go to reactions and I turn it. I just hit it again, do I? Like that?
Yeah. Yes, that's it. It's gone. Oh, it was back again.
Back again. Hang on. 2 ticks. I got really.
That's
Okay.
it. That's fine. That's fine.
Fast.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Right then, now moving on to the next item, I call on the responsible authority to provide factual information about their involvement with the premises and references to comments made in their reports and updates. Have we got anything coming forward?
Chair, the responsible authorities are the police in this application, and those conditions have been agreed along with the reduced hours. So those will form conditions upon the licence as set out in their letter, I think the 30th of September.
That's fine. And they're not present today anyway, are they?
Once the matter's agreed, they remove themselves from the forum.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Right. Now I will now ask any interested parties who wish to speak and bring forward any witnesses to their case. So I don't know who wished to go first.
So, Mr. Thomas, would you like to go first? And then we have obviously Mr. and Mrs. Phelps on the line as well that we can hear from after. Right,
so thank you. I will try to follow what I've got a message stuck right across the middle of the screen on Democratic. Send a quick message. Should I have that? Should that disappear, or is it sat there? Don't know.
It should disappear, Mr. Thomas. You can just click onto your image, click onto the images of everybody. So you're on the meeting screen and that should disappear.
Right, so thank you. I'll try to make sure that what we're talking about reinforces the points that have been made in the representations and hope and make some comments as to what we suggest might be the way forward. I'm Roger Thomas of 3 Cliff Parade, and I'm here on my own behalf and as representative of Roger Lewis of 7 Cliff Parade, immediately adjoining the car park. Mr. Lewis regrets he is unable to be here himself as he is chairing a long-arranged meeting away from South Wales. With me is Mrs. Glynis Donovan-Jones of 2 Cliff Parade. As I say, we're trying to share the screen, so that if one of us fades out, please would you say. The application is for a very restricted site between people's homes, a nursing home, and a playground for young children. I submitted 5 photographs, which Amy Rudman of Democratic Services has kindly circulated. I apologise if all members of the subcommittee already know the site well, but they are intended to allow me to emphasise some important points on the basis that a picture is worth 1,000 words. The first shows the close proximity of the site, which is the grey building on the left, and the blue roofed shelter to its right, the close proximity of those to the swings and roundabouts of the young children's playground. The second and third, 2 views of the only covered seating. The shutters are up, and the left-hand corner has the pumps installed in perhaps premature anticipation of your decision. The fourth shows the only indoor area, which is a serving counter and fridge. And the last shows the car park side with the public toilets in the front. The other 4 photographs, which I now understand have been circulated by the applicants, I didn't know what it was, where they come from. However, they do show how close the open air seating is to the playground, and that the area for which on and off licenses are sought abuts directly onto the public path between the car park and the cliff walk, and that the car park is not lit at night. A couple of preliminary points. It will be obvious to you that contrary to what the police report says, the application is not for a new cafe on the grounds of a caravan and camping site, and it should be considered for what it is, a new cafe close to homes and a nursing home. Also, the notice of this application, which was stuck to the door beyond the blue rubbish skip on the right of my 5th photo, was not displayed abutting any highway, as is required by Regulation 25 of the Licensing Act 2003 regulations 2005 for premises covering an area of more than 50 metres square. We are advised it was not properly displayed. I believe you have given contrary advice. I simply flag the difference for now. The application is for, well, it was originally for alcohol on licence, alcohol off licence, and recorded music licence. I note that apparently following deregulation, I wasn't aware of it, that there will not be an application for a licence for recorded music. I assume that you will have read the representations and I won't go through them verbatim. I just want to make some specific points. I've already, I make the point not because you are limited by what the planning permission says, except that is not so, but because it is evidence of the issue of the fulfillment of the licensing objectives, namely the evidence of the need for prevention of public nuisance. And the planning conditions which limit the use to A3 cafe only and for no other purpose, including any hot food takeaway or any other use within A3, and the reason given was to control the precise nature of the use of the site in the interest of the amenity of adjoining residential occupiers. The other one, which addresses the same issue, which is prevention of public nuisance, is that the use which is for the sale of food or drink for consumption on the premises, that use is permitted shall not be open to customers outside 9 AM to 6 PM, and the reason was again to safeguard the amenities of adjoining occupiers. Therefore, as evidence of the need for control of public nuisance, I would point to the fact that those people considering that thought that that was very relevant. There's no drinking up time in that, the hours are fixed. There is no useful precedent or analogy can be drawn from the adjoining cafe, which has very substantial indoor space and indeed very little outside, and that is all within its own land. The police propose a condition that no open containers of alcohol shall be taken away from the premises, save for alcohol that is to be consumed in any outside area controlled by the premises. This raises, to me, three issues. The planning permission doesn't allow food or alcohol to be taken off the premises. There are no outside areas controlled by the premises other than the rear open area and possibly, if it's so called, the open fronted former shelter. And, as has been seen elsewhere, the term open containers is easily abused by removable plastic tops on plastic beer glasses. If such wording is relevant to your decision, then perhaps unopened original containers or something of that nature would stop people wandering away with pints, which happens elsewhere in Penarth. Then turning to the council's own statement of licensing policy, at page 21, it says under section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998, local authorities must have regard to the likely effect of the exercise of their functions on and do all they can to prevent crime and disorder in their area. Therefore, the licensing authority, that is yourselves, will have particular regard to the likely impact of licensing on related crime and disorder in the council's area, particularly when considering the location, impact, operation and management of all proposed license or certificate applications, renewals and variations of conditions. Many of the representations focus on the current problems of drinking and drugs in and around the car park. It is unlit, and pleas to the council to lock it at night beyond the entrance to the Coast Guard building have gone unheeded. The grant of an off licence for this site would be contrary to this policy, in our view. To reinforce that point, while there is a prohibition on alcohol on Barry Island Beach, there is currently no such restriction on alcohol on the cliff walk and the adjoining field, formerly the pitch and putt course, to which the same practical issues apply. Broken glass and general litter would be serious risks. I was then going to turn to the music licence, but I take it that that is now completely irrelevant. Is that correct, Richard? Yeah. I needn't address the music licence at all.
No, that's not something that the committee can consider for licensing purposes today. I'd like to just pick up the point you made in relation to Barry Island. The council are able to make orders which prevent consumption of alcohol in public places, and I understand that has been done at Barry Island. But where, for example, there are licensed premises in Barry Island, those licensed premises wouldn't be affected by community protection notice and under the antisocial behaviour legislation. So that may be something that, as residents of Penarth, you may want to look into doing. I do believe actually that there may be some restrictions in terms of consumption of alcohol in public spaces along the seafront, but I can't comment on whether or not the Clifftop area is covered by one of those already. But in any event, a license would, in effect, allow the specific area to be licensed.
Thank you. So that if for the reasons set out in the written representations and in the oral contribution, I hope that the subcommittee will refuse to grant the requested licenses. However, should it be minded to grant something, I suggest you consider the following: no off license. I was going to say no music license, but that's not relevant now. And that any on license be subject to the following conditions: limited hours to no longer than those closing at 6 p.m. The alcohol consumed on the premises and in areas associated with the premises, which is really only the former shelter and the rear area, shall only be consumed by customers seated at tables. That the license should only be valid so long as the use is as a cafe or food-led establishment. That the licensee should provide customer litter and recycling bins and encourage their use. That only plastic or polycarbonate drinking vessels be used for the consumption of alcohol in the former kiosk and shelter and any outdoor areas associated with the premises. And that glass and other waste should not be disposed of outdoors between 7 p.m. and 8 a.m. the following day, and there should be no waste removal in those hours. I'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have, and if it will help those involved, the officers, I'll happily email a copy of these remarks to Amy following this meeting.
Yeah, you're on mute, Pam.
I beg your pardon, I forgot to unmute myself. Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas, for that. Does any member wish to raise anything with Mr. Thomas?
No, but I'll just say
Councillor
we've taken.
Wilkinson?
I'll just say we have listened and we've taken everything what people are saying into consideration.
This may be an opportune time for the applicant to respond to Mr. Thomas's suggestions in terms of conditions that he's outlined.
Can I just say, so you're aware of it, Mrs. Donovan-Jones does want to say something. That's why I put a hand up again, but I'll leave though to bring her in at the appropriate time.
Okay, Mr. Thomas, if you're agreeable, perhaps you could just run through your proposed condition one by one, and we'll have a response from the applicant as to what they say in relation to those proposals.
So the first one was no off license.
Okay, the off license that we were proposing was actually only for, like my husband said, for the takeaway of bottles of wine with meat platters and etc.
So people are going home, not to drink
in the park, not to do anything that does go off license, as if it were, the police have already made the condition that it has to be a sealed container.
Yeah, the only time we'd be selling takeaway alcohol if there was an event there, as next door would be doing at the same time. You know what I mean? So we're working in with them. You know what I mean? At that time. So if we do these events, which have got to be approved by the council individually each time we have an event, we'd be obviously in an even playing field to actually then be able to compete as a business with our next door neighbour. You know what I mean? That's the thing. You know what I mean? So we are. That's it really. You know, and in the daytime we're looking at families sitting down, having a meal, having a glass of wine, having a beer, and that's it. And obviously the closing times, like we suggested, which would be 10:30 to 8 for alcohol to 8 p.m.
Okay, if I could just stop you there.
Sorry,
dealt
you
with the
took your
first,
point. Sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
the first proposed condition by Mr. Thomas. He obviously touched on timing, so we'll if we can take the second one, Mr. Thomas. I'm sorry to do this. I'm making a note of it for the purposes.
I'm just curious as to why you want the whole open-ended rather than having events licenses for the particular events you're talking about.
It's a costly effect and timely effect for the council to do a TENS license every time. So that's the reason why that was my only thinking of it, to save the procedures of the council and also for a costly effect on our behalf as well.
And obviously we can't. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, the next point was limited in hours to no longer than those permitted, as it were, but closing at 6.
Okay. With that, we would find that quite restricted, as our next door neighbours have a longer licence and are no longer allowed to open later than us. So basically, we would be effectively losing business to another competitor.
We couldn't sort of say to our customers, drink up, guys, go next door. I mean, that's commercial disaster. From the economic point of view of how we run a business, you can't suddenly stop serving alcohol and say go next door, guys. No one else would be doing that in any location throughout the whole of the Vale of Glamorgan.
Okay, thank you. Can we move on to the third condition?
That's your answer, but they don't actually stay open after 6. However,
they do when there were events on. When the fireworks were on this year, they stayed open very late and provided alcohol sales onto the green. And they also provide alcohol sales into the playground at the moment. I've witnessed that over the last couple of weeks with
But that's something that we would never do.
So that's, maybe you need to have a look at that as well, sir.
Yeah. Alcohol consumed on the premises and in the areas associated with the premises shall only be consumed by customers seated at tables.
Yeah,
totally understand that.
We totally understand that. We've never looked to do it any other way in there.
Okay, thank you. License only valid so long as the use is as a cafe or food-led establishment.
Yeah, that's what we are.
We're not a pub. Our revenue is 20% of alcohol sales is our revenue stream, and that's sort of like probably optimistic, really. Our main trade is coffee, cake, and hot homemade food. Obviously our alcohol is just an extra item. The thing with alcohol is, I know it's a big thing for everyone. I understand that it can cause problems, but that's up to Charlotte with the licensee holder to manage that. And really with the alcohol, it's 20% of our sales, but it's a very easy sale. It's literally, you don't have to prep it, you don't have to make it, it's just that you take the lid off and you give it to somebody. And that's quite a lucrative side of the business. So that's why it's important to us. Okay. Yes,
I mean, as I say, there's nothing personal in this.
Absolutely, I get it.
As a cafe without a license, I'm happy with you. We will. The next one was licensee to provide customer litter and recycling bins and encourage their use.
Which we already have. We have done that already. That's already in place.
We have
also with the that is law that we can't empty bottle bins or anything outside those times anywhere. So that's already accountable for as well.
Only plastic or polycarbonate drinking vessels to be used for the consumption of alcohol in the kiosk and shelter and outdoor areas.
We are actually plastic free anyway and run to the plastic free policy, which is
use plastic in the shelter.
No.
So we have got glasses at the moment in the shelter. We've got glass wine glasses if we do have the license, and we've got glass pint glasses, but they'll be restricted to the shelter area and the rear area, and that's that's something that we could discuss and maybe change. But obviously we do not want to go to use single-use plastic. We're trying to stay away from single-use plastic, and obviously glass is a much more, for the environment, it's very important.
Well, if instead it were one of the appropriate, I could call it cardboard. I'm sure that's not the correct name.
No, I understand what you're saying. Composite or plastic, reusable, maybe. We will look into that if that's a big issue for you guys. But for us, go on.
And the last one is really noise related. Glass and other waste not to be disposed of outdoors between 7 p.m. and 8 the following day, and no waste removal in those hours.
Yeah, our waste removals are on Mondays and Fridays, and they come at 11 o'clock. They have been for the last 5 weeks. So that's also in hand as well.
That's 11 a.m. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Richard,
Councillor Norman has got a hand up. Did you want to ask any questions of Mr. Thomas, Councillor Norman?
Just a clarity, actually, for Mr. and Mrs. Holland.
Right.
You serve food, I understand, in your. Is it
Yes,
hot food? Do you serve hot food?
Yes. Yes.
And where do you serve this?
In the shelter, and then obviously when the rear opens, we also do takeaway food. Obviously, people might have a takeaway sandwich or a takeaway sausage sandwich or something like that, which they may consume in the park or they may consume on the grass. We don't actually know that, or they can take away the vehicle.
But the majority of our food is served inside
In the
under the shelter, and it will be in the rear entrance. And it's from breakfasts to brunches to ploughman lunches to homemade Scotch eggs, corned beef pies, quiches, etc.
Right, and the shelter belongs to your kiosk, does it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But we don't stop anyone from using the shelter. If they wanted to sit there and just sit, that's fine. We don't. And even if they buy a coffee from next door, we don't differentiate. If they want to sit in our shelter, that's fine. It's not a problem.
Thank you. Just clarify that point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Who else wants to speak of the interested parties?
The lady there.
Right,
Hello.
okay.
Hello, I just want to say, as I'm a retired police officer that lives in the road in Cliff Parade, and I'm very aware of what goes on all the time in the car park and so on. I think under the circumstances, the granting of a licence as a blanket to allow possibly 6 events a year is ridiculous. In my time, that is what the purpose of an event licence is to apply for it when an event comes along, purely to cover that event. Nobody that I'm aware of around here objects to you having a licence, a closed licence for food and so on. But the sale of alcohol off premises, you have no control over who comes into your place and asks for a bottle of wine. You do not know what they are going to do once they leave your premises. And once the word gets around that you are able to get alcohol from your premises, there is nothing to stop people coming up there, parking in the car park, coming in and purchasing alcohol from you. You cannot police that area to the extent you say you can.
I can police it I can police it as much as I possibly can. You're absolutely right, but we're not in the interest of selling it to whoever and wherever. I'm not going to be selling it to 18, 19-year-olds, which we've witnessed in the car park at the moment. But as you can say, it is out of our control. But I'm not selling alcohol to minors. We will run very strict. Well, no, it doesn't have to be minors, but that's the main problem in the car park at the moment is minors that I've witnessed playing music and mainly drug taking at the bottom of the car park. We've got 5 cameras, really good cameras with new lighting on, which actually is a preventative. So I feel that we are actually helping the area in that respect, that it has actually, if there are people in the car park, then they're going to be filmed, they're going to be on camera. And we are working with the South Wales Police at the moment. They've come back and forth to us over the last 5 weeks. We've had them in 4 times to see our cameras, and we've helped with stolen cars. We've helped with the drug taking, and we've issued number plates. So we are doing best as possible to control it.
And actually the actual lady who was responsible for prevention of crime in the Vale came to see us with 2 of her officers, and she said us being there is going to deter misbehaving in the car park because we're our presence and the cameras. So, and that's the pictures that we submitted, were how the light of the cameras light the area, which makes it safer for. It is a very, very dark area. We know that. Hence why, when it gets dark, we won't be there. You know what I mean? Because it is a very, very dark place. So, the only way you're going to stop people misbehaving in that car park is to put lighting in, which causes a problem for light pollution, and like you guys said, which is to put a gated entrance there, which would actually solve all the problems in the car park. Totally see that 100% from our point of view as well. But you still. Obviously, the lady from police prevention said to us, we are actually deterring people from doing wrongdoings in the car park. And we've worked with the police, like Charlotte said. We've uploaded to the niche or the NICE system. They've got pictures of images of young people who are misbehaving in the car park and the back of our building 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they've taken that forward now because they did do some small damage to chimneys and to a drain. So that's all been submitted to the police, and they were more than happy with the images we provided. So we are working closely to try and help you guys out. You know what I mean? That's what we want to do. This is going to be a community-led cafe. It's about the community as well. We're doing lots of other things you guys don't know about at the moment, which are going to be announced in the next few weeks. So it's not just, and the events aren't going to be big, loud, noisy evening events. They're family-orientated events. So they're in the daytime. They're to make use of that massive open space that's there, that is underutilized, and they're all going to be about the community and about families and that sort of thing. So, you know, I just want you guys to have a little bit more reassurance from us. We want to work together with you. We want you as customers. We love the location. You know, it's a fantastic site, and we want to sort of work with you guys as well. We don't want to become a problem for you. That's probably the worst thing for us. Okay.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think the idea of these events is marvellous. I don't think the area up there is used enough, but I fail to see why you need a blanket license, off license, to cover 6 events or whatever, even if it's 10 events. That is the purpose of an event license. That's why it's there, to apply for to when you are holding an event. You do not need that license then for an entire month.
Yeah,
to
but
cover
that's
one event.
revenue.
Chair, I think in fairness to the applicants, they've answered that question. They've indicated it's due to the financial issues associated with applying for numerous separate licenses. I think that is what they've said.
Yeah.
And I appreciate.
But why have an events license? Why does it exist? I mean, you could apply that to all sorts of things.
Well, a temporary event license, they're limited in the number you can have. They're limited as to duration, and they're limited in relation to the number of people that can attend an event. So, and they require an application each and every time. So it is quite commonplace that premises licenses are issued, and they will often be for a longer time than the premises will actually operate, but it allows for the opportunity for one-off events that people don't have to go through this separate regime. So I think I take your point, but I think the answer to the question is it's prohibitive in terms of the costs if they were to adopt the approach you suggest.
Okay.
Right. Mrs. Phelps has got her hand up, but I just wanted to call on Councillor Wilkinson to see whether she wanted to raise anything with the previous comments that were made.
Yeah, I just want to say this is a police matter. If there is things going on in that car park, that is out of our control at the moment. It's a police matter, and they are the ones that will deal with that. We can tell them and we can give them evidence, but it's up to the police to control that and go up there and see exactly what is happening. It's a police matter. It's not a licensing matter, I'm afraid. And that is sometimes where sometimes people don't understand.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. I'll call on Mrs. Phelps now. She's got her hand up. She wants to raise something. Is she connected?
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Phelps, you're on mute at the moment. Could you unmute by clicking the microphone?
Microphone.
Oh, there you go. Oh, you came back on and then went back off. There you go.
Yeah.
We can hear you now. If you
Is
press
that
the
all right?
camera, we can see you as well.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. That one.
That's correct. Oh, you were a little bit
Right.
sensitive there. It's gone back.
Yeah.
There you go. You're on screen and
Okay.
we can hear you now. Thank you.
Right. The police have been here recently to investigate the drug abuse, but it tends to centre around the public toilets, and at the moment they are locked early evening. I think the proposal is that they should be open till later. This, I think, will add to the problem of drug abuse taking place there, and also I think the noise, the problem of music going on until that hour, it is much too. It's much too obtrusive. We don't all share the same taste in music, and in fact, you know, it's been a problem when we've had buskers on the cliff top on Sunday mornings, and people have objected to that.
That's not their business.
But we also feel that we have lost the amenity of the public shelter, because it's now there are a few tables and chairs, totally inadequate compared with the space that was there before, when there were benches around the sides for the elderly to take shelter and sit down, and then the youngsters would stand in the middle, and it would accommodate most people fleeing from a heavy shower. That no longer applies. I don't see how it's possible to license what should be a public shelter, and that amenity is no longer there. But I feel this blanket license and for those hours is totally unacceptable, so close to a children's playground. It will deter families from bringing their children to play in that playground if there's drinking going on. And this is particularly true for the many Muslim families who use that facility, because of course they don't allow alcohol. They don't drink alcohol. And I think that's also part of the strong non-conformist tradition that we've always had in Wales, particularly in South Wales. I really object to the thought of all this drinking going on, and it's bound to mean more litter, more broken glass. People won't necessarily behave in a civilized way over it. I think it risks attracting completely the wrong clientele to the cliff top, and there's bound to be far more disturbance and noise and crime. And I think we have lost what was a valuable amenity in that public shelter, and it was for the public, not for a particular business. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Do any other parties wish to question Mrs. Phelps on her comments?
This is Mr. Phelps here. Yes, I am on camera now. Could I reiterate the point made by Mr. Thomas of I don't see the need for such an expensive license. I appreciate the assurances that have been given about what will happen, but the problem is, of course, that the permissions go way beyond what the applicants currently want to do. And I'm concerned that if the application is made, it may, over time, gradually expand. And I fail to see the need for such an expansive permission if it's only for the 6 events. And I appreciate the point Mr. Price made about cost. I don't think the applicant said it was prohibitive. They said it would be more costly, which of course I accept. But prohibitive is not a phrase that I remember anybody else using. Thank you.
Mr. Phelps, I do apologise. That was probably what I was referring to in relation to other premises licenses that haven't gone down, and in the past they've said that. I accept they didn't specifically use that word. I'd like to pick up on the point that you made in applying for a permission that goes beyond how they say they're going to operate the business going forward. The licensing regime is one which has built into it and is fundamental to the licensing regime of review of the license. So, for example, if you had a quiet country pub that was operating for a number of years and providing food, and it was all very sedate and very, very nice, and a new publican came in and decided to operate under the same licenses to the same hours, but you were having an establishment which had turned into, you know, in effect, a nightclub because of the management, or the nature of it had changed, the Licensing Act is set up for people to bring about a review of a license. So when we grant a license, often people will say, well, this is how I intend to operate. But built into the regime is, well, if you're not operating in accordance with how you make your application, you'll be back before the committee and we can review your license. I hope that gives you some...
So can I just clarify that? So if in fact things did, well, are the assurances we've given by the applicants, are they part of the application so that we can then, when we say,
well, of course, what the applicant is telling us today is the evidence that the subcommittee will take into account in whether or not they grant the license and what conditions would attach to it. I mean, this is a meeting that's being recorded. If what is being applied for is substantially different, that would allow you the opportunity to review that license. For example, operating from 10:30 to 10:30, selling food with accompanying alcoholic drinks. If that turns into operating 10:30 to 10:30 as a youth club with everybody falling out of their drunk, that would be materially different as the application is applied for today. So in my view, that would bring about a review of that license. So I hope that provides you with some reassurance.
Can I, yeah, so in order to ask for a review, we'd have to argue that how it was being operated was materially different from what we were told it was going to be in the beginning.
You'd have to, that could be a ground, but it would be breach of the licensing objectives. So the license objectives, for example, if it was crime and disorder, if it was noise, if it was public nuisance, and despite the assurances you've had today, those were arising, you could bring forth a review of the license.
Right. No, it's not a relevant one. Okay, thank you.
I believe Councillor Wilkinson's got a hand up. She wants to ask a question.
No, I was just I agree with Richard. I was going to say that if anything does not appear to be happening to this license in front of us, and things happen that is out of their license, it can come back to us. The people come back and say to us, this is what's happening, not what you have agreed to, if it is past a day. So there is always a way to come back, and then the committee will re-look at it.
Thank you for that, Margaret. I believe Mr. Holland from Wilmore's has got his hand up. Do you wish to raise something?
No, I just wanted to reassure the neighbours, obviously. Music, we play Radio 2 on very low levels, ambient music. That's it. You know, we may put a playlist on, maybe like a Fleetwood Mac radio playlist, very low, sort of like a mixture of easy listening music. We're not going to be playing loud, booming music at all at this location. We understand where it is. We understand the residents and their concerns with regards to that. So we wanted to reassure them that, and in fact, the actual back area, rear of the building, which is going to be made into a community space, which will be decked and seating for us as a shop as well, will have no speaker in it at all. It's only the front of the shelter that has the speaker. And it's very low ambient music. You can't hear it from 2 or 3 foot away from the actual shelter itself. Okay, so I just wanted to just to reassure people of that. All right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holland. Any other questions? Right. Okay. Well, I'll move on to the next item, and I would like to ask those making representations to sum up. And in this relevant order would be the responsible responsible authorities in the first instance.
Chair, given that the responsible authorities have agreed the conditions, it would be to move now on to other persons. So Mr. Thomas, Mr. and Mrs. Phelps, anyone who's said anything thus far, if there's anything additional you want to say, now's your opportunity. If you've said all you need to say, then of course the matter can be left there, but ultimately it's for the applicant to have the final say if they wish to add anything further. But I think there's been quite an open and transparent discussion this morning. But it's over to you, Mr. Thomas. Is there anything further you'd like to say?
I'm very grateful to Mr. and Mrs. Holland for the assurances they have given. That the points that I've made, I can't, on behalf of the absent Roger Lewis, respond for him. But I think that the points that I have made were the ones that we were concerned about, and that I have nothing to add beyond that.
Right, thank you. Right, shall I move on and ask the applicants if they could?
Just if we can confirm, Chair, that Mr. and Mrs. Phelps, do they have any additional points they'd like
Sorry,
to make?
I forgot about Mrs. Phelps. I do apologise.
No.
Nothing?
No, we're just just to say that I thought I didn't explicitly say, but I thought Mr. Thomas's conditions were very apposite, and were those met, we would be much happier. Thank you. I think that's all.
Thank you for that. Right then, can I ask the applicants if they would like to summarise on their case?
I think we said pretty much everything we want to say. We are a family-run business. We are we're employing 6 people in the area. That's what we're all about, and we're community-led. That's what we're all about. Looking to stay within what we discussed, the opening times that we discussed. That's what we've said. And regards music, again, like I said, obviously won't be playing any loud music as possibly you've been misled in that respect. And I think that's it. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, thank you very much for this. Now, do any of the members of the subcommittee wish to seek any clarification on any of the points raised? No. Can't see any. No. Right, okay. Now, as a subcommittee, we will now retire to deliberate in private, and we'll be only accompanied by the legal officer and the committee chair. And I thank you all for attendance. And the legal officer will give the procedure, the details.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We'll retire shortly. My role will only be to provide any legal advice and points of law, should you have any. It'll be a matter for you to deliberate and consider. It is unlikely that the decision will be provided today. The decision will be provided in writing, and it will be sent to all the parties, I anticipate, within the next 7 days.
Right.
Are there any questions that anybody has in relation to that procedure and the decision?
Any queries for Richard? No? No? Right, okay then. Well, thank you very much for your attendance, and we'll obviously be in touch as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for joining us, and thank you very much, Mr. and Mrs. Holland. We will be in touch shortly.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you also, Mr. and Mrs. Phelps. If you wouldn't mind disconnecting from the hearing, we'd be very grateful.
Just try.
Amy, is everybody disconnected?
Just double checking now.